Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today, we're going to be talking about the new album from Billy Currington titled We Are Tonight. Now, here's something about modern music that the majority of you probably already know. There are a lot of singers and musicians who don't actually write their own songs. In some cases, they might be the primary songwriter, they might compose, some of the lyrics, but they typically have somebody helping them, maybe writing the melody line, or with some of the instrumentation, or maybe some elements of the production, or just one of the other pieces that go together that make the average song. It takes a supremely gifted songwriter who is able to compose every single element of the song, and particularly in pop music, you don't seem to find these guys the same way anymore. It's not often you find guys like Prince or Beck, for example. However, you did used to see a lot more singer-songwriters in country music, and one of the big frustrations in the movement of country music towards the mainstream, at least for me, is that most country artists don't write their songs in the same way anymore. With the rise of guys like Garth Brooks, and there are some country musicians who don't write any of their own material, just relying on the Nashville country song-generating machine to crank out song after song after album after album. And look, I know this isn't exactly a new thing, it's been around since the 80s, but it's something that kind of does frustrate me as a critic, because certain songs can lose something when you know that in your mind that these songs don't have that same direct, intimate connection with the singer in the same way. You know that these songs that are being penned, they might be built on somebody else's emotions, not the actual singer's emotion. Now, that being said, I'm not exactly about to condemn the practice of other people writing musician songs for them. Some people aren't good songwriters. It happens. Writing and being a good songwriter is really kind of hard, trust me, I know. And thus the job of the singer and the performer changes somewhat. It's now their job to sell us the song, to make it their own, not through composition, but through their actual delivery. Look, I know that Garth Brooks didn't write his hit signature song, The Dance, but his delivery is so damn good on that song that you can associate it with him forever in your mind's eye. It transcends the fact that he didn't write the song because he makes it his own in a very big way. And look, that's one of the big reasons when I look at pop music, per se, and in country music, that I don't mind the fact that producer-songwriters like Max Martin and Dr. Luke really exist. Since in the best cases, I don't associate Max Martin with I Want It That Way or Since You've Been Gone. I associate those songs with the acts that made them real, that made them popular, that made those songs their own. In this case, the Backstreet Boys and Kelly Clarkson. But even with all of that in mind, a big warning light tends to go off in my mind when I hear that a guy who used to write the majority of his own material is now only performing songs written by other people, which is in the case of the new album by Billy Currington titled We Are Tonight. Now, for those of you who are inevitably having some trouble telling the various modern male country acts apart, let me refresh your memory and inform you that Billy Currington, in my mind, has always been one of the better ones, mostly because he's a little bit older and he's something of a traditionalist, harkening back to the country of guys like Alan Jackson and Tim McGraw and Garth Brooks. It helps a little bit that this guy is older, as I said, and isn't exactly a great technically proficient singer either, or instead relying more on soul and like a genuinely honest delivery. If I'm going to describe his vocals on previous albums, he's got something of a hangdog style of delivery. Not exactly polished, kind of a little bit run down. In comparison with a singer like Keith Urban, who's got a very strong pop sensibility, Billy Currington doesn't have this, but at the same time, he has that same sort of honest likability that Keith Urban has. Unfortunately, it's a bit hard to tell if some of that likability is an act, given that he's currently facing charges linked to his rather poor response to a tour boat buzzing his island home off the coast of Georgia. Yet, despite that uncomfortable incident, I was still looking forward to this newest album, even though, as I mentioned, he didn't contribute to or write any of the songs on this album. So, with all that in mind, how'd it turn out? Well, I will say this, it's definitely a little bit more interesting than I expected. Look, I won't say that his newest album is great by any stretch of the mind, it doesn't really stick in the mind after you listen to it a couple of times, but there are elements of this album that I did like a fair bit, and considering I really should despise this album, that's saying a lot. Now, some of you are probably asking the question, wait, you said you were looking forward to this album, now why are you saying you should despise it? Well, you see, folks, Billy Currington's newest album can be slotted into the growing number of bro country albums. For those of you who are unfamiliar with this particular term, bro country was a term coined by Jody Rosen with respect to the recent rise of modern male country stars targeting, my demographic, with easily digestible mainstream country music aimed at talking about booze, cars, and girls, the same sort of focus you wouldn't find outside of hip-hop. But I'd like to qualify this a little bit, because to focus a little bit tighter on the actual issue. After all, country musicians have been singing booze, cars, and girls for decades. This isn't exactly a new thing. To me, bro country has a very specific mood and tone that's rather unique. It tends to be light, it tends to be fairly breezy, occasionally having a harder rock edge, but not too hard, and it doesn't strain to challenge the slightest thought or preconception that the listener might have in any way, shape, or form. And on that note, Billy Currington's We Are Tonight might just be the quintessential bro country album in nearly every single way. Light, upbeat tone with songs about booze and girls, well, they've got that. Occasional bits of a rock edge, but not too much of a rock edge, check. I mean, for God's sake, there's a song on this album titled Wingman, which is about a guy getting betrayed by his wingman when picking up a girl at a club. This is the closest you get to bro country without Axe body spray and bad tattoos. I mean, seriously, wow. But okay, putting in mind that this is a bro country album, so why is this any good instead of being reprehensible? Well, for a few reasons that I didn't quite expect. For one, the production nearly completely abstains from grabbing any sort of a modern pop edge outside of some of the more spacious sounds on loan from the Eric Church or Brad Paisley studios, which means that a fair amount of the instrumental texture survives, particularly in the guitars and the strings that pop up. It's more of a traditional edge, and it does wonders for helping this album. It also helps that there are some really good hooks and not really many issues with the technical songwriting, all things considered, which tends to keep up a fairly quick pace and surprisingly avoids many of the uglier cliches of bad country music, like the pandering to Southern pride and some of the leering sensibilities just staring at girls and drooling. Yeah, there are songs like Wingman and It's Hard to Be a Hippie, and especially Banana Pancakes, that are goofy and more than a little stupid, but then again, I get the feeling that's part of the point. And to be fair to this album, there are a few songs that aim to tap into that free-roaming, you can do anything male instinct that do work fairly well, at least they worked for me, like on songs like 23 Degrees in South, and especially the title track, We Are Tonight. But really, the strength of this album and what I think makes it work as a bro country album, as actually a good bro country album, is Billy Currington himself. And this comes back to what I was saying regarding pop stars who make songs written by others their own. Simply put, Billy Currington is thankfully one of the least threatening country singers working today, and his voice does a pretty good job of painting him as that underdog. And really, that does miles for his likability. One of my big issues that I've had with bro country in the vein of somebody like Luke Bryan or occasionally Florida Georgia Line is that they can get kind of abrasive and a little harsh and relies way too much on alpha dog swagger that doesn't always work, or it comes across as abrasive or threatening, or could be, in the worst cases, come across as inauthentic. But Billy Currington doesn't really seem to do that. And even on songs like Hey Girl, he seems to be astounded that the girl is paying attention to him at all. It seems like the bro macho douchebag thing is a very weird fit for him, because he's a nice enough guy. He doesn't, and yet he's not even trying to milking for sympathy, seeing other cases like John Mayer. He just comes across as a decent dude, if a bit of a clumsy, silly doofus. Maybe it's the fact that he's a little older and he's left the swaggering and the ass-kicking to other singers, but Billy Currington is a lover, not a fighter, and it's hard to work up any real dislike for the guy. And really, that kind of is a good template for how bro country can work. Sure, you can have your songs about booze and girls, but if you play it with a certain amount of class, or dare I even say it, maturity, you can actually make something that's reasonably tolerable in the modern country scene. So yeah, in the end, I can kind of recommend We Are Tonight by Billy Currington. Yes, I want you guys to all be very clear that this is indeed a bro country album, and those are still not my flavor, with a few of the characteristics of modern country that will piss people off. But look, it's not threatening or offensive. Hell, it's not even really that leering or objectifying either. It always places the situation where the girl is on such a high pedestal that the guy is more, he's trying to work his way up to that. Now look, the weak moments on this album come from some of Billy Currington's bad jokes and when sometimes his lazy complacency can bite him in the ass on a couple tracks. But then again, that's typically where traditionalist country singers in the 90s went wrong too. And he thankfully avoids some of the overproduction and some of those pop sensibilities that would have made this album a little bit less tolerable. What helps this album a lot is his general likability and the fact that the instrumentation and production is remarkably solid for a modern country album, even when the songwriting kind of goes off the rails a bit. With that, you know what? I'm gonna be generous. I'm gonna give this one a 7 out of 10. It's not exactly gonna be an album that stays with you. It's pretty lightweight, but look, if you're looking for modern country that won't offend, you could definitely do a lot worse than Billy Currington. Check this guy out. So yeah, If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Thanks a lot for watching. If you've got any other albums that you'd like me to take a look at, then I'd be more than happy to take a look. Also, if there's anything I could do to improve my presentation, I'm always on the lookout for that. But until then, see you next time.